Am I on? Hello? Hi, everybody. As Rob said, thanks very much for coming to join us this morning. Thanks very much to our sponsors, Power On Platforms. Is Peter here? No? Peter Edgen, he'll be speaking about Power On Platforms later on. They're a great organization because they're doing some great work. So my name is Gerry Hampson. I work for Ergo Group based in Dublin. I've been doing WMUG meetings now since 2014. My first one was in Reading in 2014. So doing this, working with the lads for quite some time. So let's just crack on. Disclaimer, because this technology is changing so rapidly. So if I say something that's out of date, please let me know. Has anybody actually played with virtual desktop? I know Rob asked for some hands a little bit. Yes, same as myself, a little bit. Obviously, it's all quite new. And I haven't been doing it that long myself, so I'm open to suggestions on how to use it. I'm still trying to figure out how can we best use this. I have some good ideas, but I'm looking for ideas from you guys as well, and how best to improve the implementation. So one thing I wanted to start with is, I've been asked this question a couple of times from my customers. What is this all about? Is this the same as Microsoft Managed Desktop? Someone asked me that. Well, it's not, obviously, because Microsoft Managed Desktop is something very different. It is also a cloud service, obviously, but Microsoft will manage Windows 10 and Office 365 Pro Plus on your hardware. That's the difference. Now, with the Managed Desktop, Microsoft, they maintain a list of hardware that they need you to have, and then they'll manage the hardware, the software updates, Office 365, end user device deployment, that kind of thing. So that is the difference, and it's a fair question. Okay, so back to Windows Virtual Desktop. What is it? It's a desktop and app virtualization service that runs in the cloud. So what are some of the key features that we get with that? So the biggest thing for me is the fact that the infrastructure services that we previously needed for the on-prem stuff, like a gateway, brokering, licensing, diagnostics, all that kind of thing, they're all provided as a service by Microsoft in Azure. So there's no need to deploy and maintain any on-prem infrastructure whatsoever. What does it support? It supports full desktop, remote app, and persistent or non-persistent VMs, or dedicated or multi-session experiences. You guys might have heard recently about Windows 10 multi-session and what that means. So this is something that's introduced with Windows Virtual Desktop. It allows you to offer the full Windows 10 experience, but multiple users can log into the same VM via RDP. And this used to only be available with Windows Server, and it's now available with Windows 10 Desktop. You can only get this through Windows Virtual Desktop in Azure. And what else can we get? FS Logix, is that something that's familiar? I remember back in the day when FS Logix was its own separate company, it used to get us out of trouble all the time with Citrix, where you'd have a problem with Outlook profiles and that kind of thing. So FS Logix has been an industry leader in profile management in virtual environments for years. And Microsoft have now bought that, and it's included with Windows Virtual Desktop. But we're going to talk a bit about that and show you a little bit about that later on. So what does the architecture look like? So Windows Virtual Desktop, it's domain-based, but it also leverages Azure AD as an identity provider. So you can have additional security controls. You can have MFA and conditional access on your virtual machines. Also, with ADFS, you can implement a single sign-on infrastructure to your VMs. So it's essentially VDI as a service. And as I said, all the resources are managed by Microsoft. That's really attractive for me to not have to do that myself. And finally, you can manage the pools, the pool VMs by using Config Manager or Intune. Is anybody doing that now, managing your desktops with Config Manager? I'm trying to figure out, with Config Manager, so what are you doing? What kind of things do you do with the Config Manager? Do you deploy software or? Yeah. It's same as me. I'm trying to feel my way of it, trying to figure out how it all works together. So, yeah, but it's a work in progress. So there's a lot to come, I think. Okay, so with Windows Virtual Desktop, so Microsoft obviously can leverage the capability of the stuff they own, the power of Azure and Microsoft 365. So through Microsoft 365, we can configure conditional access and MFA. And then look at the Azure investment there. So 3,500 global cybersecurity experts with an annual investment in cybersecurity of $1 billion. That's quite enormous. And then we have Windows Virtual Desktop, which traditional AD joined VMs and now supported by Azure AD authentication. And we also have Reverse Connect. Now, I'm not really that fully sure about this, but I'll tell you what I do know is that the typical model, the virtualization model that you used to have is inbound connections into your environment. So you're obviously opening holes into your environment. It's different with Windows Virtual Desktop because they're not exposed to the internet directly. There's a negotiated connection called Reverse Connect. But the connection is actually established. It's an outbound connection from the virtual machines, and the endpoint is Azure AD. So Azure behaves as some kind of a reverse proxy for RDP traffic. Now, I don't fully understand it myself. I just know that that's the technology that means that you don't have to have RDP connection straight into your environment. So, what are the use cases? This is one. Nobody ever wants to go to the office every day. I love this slide here. Do you see this one up here, this guy going the opposite direction? He must be thinking, what do they know that I don't know? Oh, what's going on? So, yeah, so use cases. Now, Peter and I have had good long chats about this, trying to figure out how we can leverage this for our customers. So in the company I work for, we've implemented this for our own contractors. Just saves us the hassle of providing laptops for short-term resources. And it works very, very well. It's also a good remote working solution. Peter came up with a couple then. Desktop DR, that's a good one. For some kind of regulatory restricted environments. And also it's a good one for application compatibility when you're upgrading from Windows 7. You come across some application that doesn't work with Windows 10. It also seems to be a lot cheaper. Now I say seems to be, this is anecdotal evidence, but it seems to be a lot cheaper than on-premise Citrix. Anything else anybody can think of? Any other use cases? Remote sites, yeah. Bandwidth restriction on remote sites is a good one. Yeah, for sure. I'm going to make a note of that. Could you make a note of a couple of these? Make a note of these, of just use cases. Go on. The first one is bandwidth restriction on remote sites. And what was your? Office 365 solution with VDI, yeah, because you can use FSLogix for the profiles, yeah.
I've got users who don't want to walk around with laptops, they'd rather walk around with their iPads and implement into desktops. So it's just
mobility. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, I'm going to show you on that. It's small, but it works. You know. Anything else? No. Okay, thanks for that. So what are the supported hosts. So we used to have traditional terminal services, Windows Server, operating system. That's obviously now considered a legacy solution for terminal services and VDI. We used to get native single session experience. Yeah, and so also then Windows 10 Enterprise, which, as I said previously, give us the Windows 10 single session. But now we have Windows 10 multi-session, and that is obviously the recommended solution moving forward. And you can imagine it's great for scalability. You can also do your own custom images. So Windows 7, you can capture your own Windows 7 image into the gallery, and then you can deploy that. And it's brilliant. And the cool thing about if you do that with Windows 7 is you get the 3 years extended security updates for free. So it's kind of a no-brainer if you need to have Windows 7 machines on-prem for application compatibility from, what day was the 14th? Friday, was it? From Friday, no more updates. So move that machine to Azure and you get 3 years. So it makes perfect sense. The other thing is get rid of the Windows 7, of course. That's the party line. But you can't always do that. Right, so this table then shows us the supported operating systems and their deployment methods. So you can see Windows Server 2012, 16, 19, Windows 7 Enterprise yet, and then there's Windows 10, so Enterprise, and then there's the multi-session stuff. I see you got 1809 and 1903. 1909 obviously is not available yet, but shortly. So you probably already own Windows Virtual Desktop. And any organization that's got Windows 10 Enterprise E3 per user license or better already owns the rights to use Windows Virtual Desktop. Or if you have RDS CALs, server CALs with software assurance. Now, obviously, just owning it isn't enough. You then need to pay for the Azure Compute and storage and for the network usage. So the VMs and traffic egress from Azure is also chargeable on top of that. So why would you? I don't understand. It could be a legacy thing, but why would people still maintain the on-prem VDI? Who wants that hassle when somebody is prepared to take that hassle from you? Now, I'm not a great virtual or VDI guy. I'm not an expert in that area, and I'm sure there are really sexy, cool things that Citrix does that can't be done here. Who cares, to be honest? I think this is a no-brainer myself. I really do. So, now, before you actually start your deployments, if you're looking at this for a proof of concept or something, you can actually assess if the experience will be good enough in your region. Microsoft provides an online experience estimator where you can actually estimate the round-trip time from your location through the service and then for each of the regions that you're going to deploy VMs. So they're fairly decent round trips there. They're on milliseconds. So I don't think there's anything outrageous there. But you'll know in advance before you actually get started. Okay, so let's get started ourselves then. So the first decision you need to make when you're deploying this solution is you need to choose an identity strategy. So what are we going to do? How are we going to deliver this? As I said, the virtual machines must be domain joined. So that's your starting point. So obviously these VMs are going to be in Azure. So where's your domain controller going to be? How will you set up your DNS and networking in Azure so that the VMs can access the DC? Will you need ExpressRoute or some kind of VPN to on-premise DC? How will you actually do it? So I'm going to show you shortly what I did. So these are the things you need in your infrastructure at a minimum. You need Azure AD. It's a requirement. And you need Active Directory. So as I said, the VMs must be domain joined or hybrid AD joined. They can't just be Azure AD joined. That's not supported. There's a couple of ways you can configure that. You can do the traditional Active Directory and have Azure AD Connect to sync the two for hybrid organization. Or it's also supported to implement Azure AD domain services just for cloud organizations. Now, that's not what I've done. I've done the traditional on-prem DC. And it's important to get your networking right. So I'm sure you guys all know about Azure and the way VMs work in Azure, but the DHCP in Azure VMs, it's not the same as we know it on-premise. So when you configure a virtual network or a VNet in Azure, and then you create a VM in that network, the IP address and subnet mask are issued automatically based on what subnet you've given to that VNet. You can't then just configure a static IP address in those machines. If you want them to have static IP addresses, even for servers, you have to create an Azure DHCP reservation, okay? DNS then is slightly different, so you need to configure DNS in the properties of the virtual network, and that is passed to all the VMs. And we need to do that, otherwise the domain join step will fail when we go to provision our host pool. I'm going to show you how to do that. So in my own test environment, I created just a domain controller, and I created it directly in Azure in the same virtual network that the VMs are. But in a production environment, it's more likely that you're going to have on-premise domain controllers with some kind of a VPN or something to Azure, or quite possibly you'll have domain controllers in Azure already. So as long as the virtual network you have for the virtual desktop stuff, as long as that can access your domain controller, you're fine. Okay, next thing then, your subscription. So we obviously need to have a paid subscription. This is going to cost some money. And you can use the Azure calculator in the beginning to estimate the costs. You're also going to need these to get going. So you'll need the tenant ID or a directory ID. They're kind of interchangeable terms. You'll need your subscription ID, and you'll need to know how to find both of those. I'll show you shortly if you don't know. And you'll need an Azure AD Global Admin account. So that is needed in the beginning only in order to grant the virtual desktop service permissions to your Azure AD instance. So the way you do that is you sign into WVD service using that account, and you just give consent. That process then creates a couple of enterprise applications for server and client apps that we've seen in other services. We also need a virtual desktop tenant creator user. He's going to create the virtual tenant. Now, you could use your global admin for that, but it's best not to. Least permission and all that. So this is just an Azure AD user that's assigned the application role for Windows Virtual Desktop. And finally, then, we need to decide about the implementation of FS Logix containers. So what's all that about? Do you remember roaming profiles? I hated them, absolutely hated them. They just grow in size, out of control. They were a mess. So user logs in, the profile, which could be huge, is copied from a central location directly to the desktop. The guy has to wait until it's pretty much finished. It was a horrible experience. It was an awful technology. So FS Logix is designed to provide similar functionality in remote computing environments. So the profile is actually stored in an FS Logix container, which is just a VHD file or a VHDX file. It's a virtual hard drive. And what happens is the user logs in to the virtual machine in the host pool, and this container is dynamically attached to his virtual machine as an extra drive. It's essentially a hard drive. And so that means that the user profile is immediately available. And the reason it's much better is no data is actually copied. It just attaches the file and it's immediately available. So it's a much, much better experience than roaming profiles and the like. This is why FS Logics has been a leader, industry leader in this kind of technology for many, many years. Microsoft have now, well, I said now, last year, I think, 2 years ago. Many years ago, Michael? Not listening. So Microsoft have actually purchased FS Logics. So this technology is now available directly in Windows Virtual Desktop, and it's for free. They're not charging anything additional for it. It used to be very expensive to buy standalone. Okay, so the next decision that we have to make then is, where do we actually host these FS Logics containers and profiles? There are some choices on what to do here. You can just do it on a file share. This is the easiest one. It's very straightforward. It's the one I've done in my lab, and I'm going to show you exactly how that works. So it's just in the virtual network we have, create a virtual machine, create a share. That's it. Easy as that. You can use Azure Files in conjunction with Azure AD Domain Services, or you can use Azure NetApp files. So what's that? That's high performance metered storage in Azure. I wanted to do that one, but you have to actually register and submit a wait list to get access to NetApp files. I wasn't bothered with that. I thought, sign up, get it, I might do it, but I'm not waiting. So I used the file share option, and it's really trivial to set up. It's really, really straightforward. Okay, so all the prerequisites are in place. What are the deployment steps? So the first thing we do is to create the tenant, the Windows Virtual Desktop tenant. It's literally 2 PowerShell commandlets. You need to download and import the Virtual Desktop PowerShell commands for this. So you sign into the Windows Virtual Desktop service using the tenant creator user account that we have. And then you run your commandlet to create the tenant. That's it, done. You need to choose a tenant name, which has to be unique. And in order to create the tenant, you need your Azure tenant ID and subscription ID. And we're going to show how to get them shortly. That's it, tenant created, 2 commands. And then you can create your host pool. You do this in Azure. In the Azure portal, select create a resource, and you search for Windows Desktop, Virtual Desktop, and provisioning a host pool. And we're actually going to run through one and create one and see the options that you have. And one of the options you have when you're creating it is who's going to use it. So as soon as you've created the VMs, it's automatically published to those users at that same time. And then you can configure the FS Logics container that we talked about. Okay, so let's have a look at some of that stuff. Right. Okay, so in Azure, let's have a look first. Where do we find the tenant ID or directory ID? This is a bit annoying the way different terms are used. They're in different places called different things. So if we look at there's our Azure AD, and you can see the tenant ID starts with 47. Oh, there was a test. Okay. Okay, so we're in Azure AD, and we can see, let's just do that again. Azure AD, and we can see the tenant ID starts with 47. If we look in the properties of that, call it something slightly different, directory ID, but it's still the same ID, 47. So we're going to need that in creating the tenant. Then we want subscription ID. So where do we find that? Into subscriptions. You need to select the right one. I've got a couple of them here. Select the right one, and you will see the subscription ID. So if you hover over it, you'll be able to copy to a clipboard here. Okay? So remember I said then, so we sign in first to Windows Virtual Desktop, and we give consent. And when we give consent, 2 applications are created. Let's have a look for those. Enterprise applications. They're the 2 applications, server and client apps. So we open that. If we look in the users and groups, see 2 users. So the admin role, this is the guy that actually granted the consent in the first place, and he's got default access role assigned. That's not enough to create the virtual desktop tenant. That's why we've got Fred as the tenant creator. Okay? Let's have a look at our virtual networks that I've pre-created. And if we look at the DNS, this is where we configure DNS server here, so that when I create virtual machines in that network, they know exactly where to look for my domain controller to join the domain. Okay, so let's actually then create some VMs. So we're going to create a resource. If we look for Windows Virtual Desktop, provision a host pool. I've got to create. Now you need to choose your correct your correct subscription, resource group, which one I created earlier. Our region is, in Ireland, we're North Europe, which I don't quite understand considering we're the most westerly part of Europe. But I don't get that, but anyway. So we give it a name. Call it WMUG. Okay, so we look here. This is these are the users that are going to have access to these VMs. You have to enter the users with a comma. Now, I'm not sure here. I haven't tried, but I think I will. This doesn't seem to support Azure groups, dynamic groups, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because that's the way you really would manage it in an enterprise. So that's something I'm going to work on and try and figure that out if I can start using some groups there. In the meantime, a couple of guys in my lab here that we're going to use. Say that again, sorry?
Isn't the default desktop users just used to sign up into Active Directory initially? Getting the Windows virtual machine signed to Active Directory?
No. As it says there, that's the user. They're going to be automatically assigned to the app group for the host pool. Right. So if they're not in that, they can't actually access the pool in the first place. Okay, so that's the first page done. Then next page is configuring the virtual machines. So what are our choices here? So I'm going to say that we're going to use 20 standard users, and it'll size what it's expecting us to create automatically. So I'm going to change the size of these myself because I have to pay for this. So I'm just going to give some B2S here at the moment. And it's going to create, based on the users I've said, and standard users, it's going to create 3 virtual machines. And virtual machine name prefix. So I'm going to call it WMUG, and what the machines will then be called WMUG-0-1-2. Okay, and next. What are we going to pick? So we're going to pick Windows 10 Enterprise Multi-Session with Office 365 Pro Plus. These are the options that you have. I'm going to choose premium SSDs. Here's my domain. Oh, that's not right. So it's my domain account here. This is the account with permissions to join the domain. Oh. I've just lost my mouse. Okay. Now there's something a bit strange about this I noticed. So if we hover over this here, you have to follow complexity rules here, which may not be the same as the complexity rules that you have in your own AD, and they're quite serious. They're quite serious rules. I think this has to be a minimum of 12 characters, for example. So you need to make sure that this particular account has got a highly complex password, or it won't work. So when I start typing here, it's all gone wrong. Jesus. Ooh. Well, you can actually see it there. The value of the password must be between 12 and 123 characters, and it has to have 3 special things. So it's quite a serious password. Oh my God. Sorry, everybody. Sorry, just bear with me a second. I'm having technical difficulty here. I'm not sure if it's the thing or my own. No, that's.
Was that over the air that you were trying? HDMI over the air?
No. Well, I started misbehaving, and then so when I disconnected, it didn't go back on at all. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, thanks. Let's just do all this again then. You can see how trying to actually deal with users manually is a bit painful. That doesn't really make sense to me. All right, I have to pay for this, as I said, so we're going to choose these ones. Okay, WMUG. Right, we're back where we are. Okay, everybody. Right, we're back where we are. Okay. Account to join the domain. And the password. Keep it down, lads, will you? And confirm the password. Lads, keep it down. Just talking to myself. Okay, so we have to specify the on-prem domain and OU. Specify the domain, yes. That's my domain name. What OU do I want? It's optional, but makes perfect sense to do. And then I need to choose my virtual network. Now this is one that I've already Say again? Yeah. Now, the daft thing here is that I've got several virtual networks. Ah, do you know what? My region, that's it. There you go. You have to have all your resources in the same region. You learn things the hard way, don't you? And I should have a virtual network here. There you go. Say again? It's going to cost me money, is it? Whoa. Well, let's have a look. That's important. All right, there's my subnet. Oh, that's an expensive one. Good man, buy that man a drink. Okay, I think we're getting there. No, reset this, look. That's a devil. Okay, and subnets. Okay, so we're going to give it a name. It's already in a group, so let's call it WMUG. And then the owner is the tenant creator, which is a guy called Fred. And Fred's password. Okay. And that's it. That's all the configuration you have to do, and then you create your deployment, which will just crack on. It takes about 10 minutes for the virtual machines to be visible in your Active Directory, and about 20 to 25 minutes for everything to be ready. All right. So here's one I did earlier. This is my domain controller with 3 virtual machines that I previously did. Okay, and this is one of the virtual machines. We're going to look at FSLogix and see it in action and how it works. So it's just an app that you download and install, and I've done that on this machine. So have a look at that. Microsoft FSLogix app. And it creates a registry path. And all you have to do is you have to create a new key for profiles. So I've created this profiles key. It enables FSLogix, and it gives a location. So let's have a look at that location. It's just a share. And this is the virtual machine that I created with that share. And this is one of the FSLogix profiles. And if you look into it, it's just a virtual hard drive. That's all it is. And when Joe logs in, that VHD is directly connected to that VM, and his profile is available immediately. You can see the size is a couple hundred meg. It's not enormous, but if that was 2 gig, it would take quite some time for that to copy. That's your share. Yeah. So it's created once, and then it's available on all the machines. Okay, let's have a look at that, actually. So, yeah, so what I did was I had 3 VMs, so I did this manually on the first VM, it was just my lab, and then I installed the FSLogix on the others, but I just imported that reg key, exported and imported again. You could do that with some automation, install the software and the reg key with config manager or GPO or whatever it is you want to use. Okay, now this only works for a user that hasn't actually logged in beforehand. If he logs in first, he gets a local profile and all bets are off. So what you have to do is you have to go in afterwards, delete that user profile, and then the next time it's signed in, he gets this FSLogix profile. Okay?
Sorry.
Yes?
Have you tried to restore files from that PhD?
To restore.
Backup and restore. So if a user's profile gets corrupted or something like that, you can try to restore it from the PhD?
I haven't. Are you saying you have and you've had problems? Or the question is, have you tried restoring files from the VHD? No. But of course, you could include that in your backup routine and have different versions of that file if you so needed. But no, I haven't. Have you got a specific reason for asking that? Or?
No, just from previous experience, basically the principle where you user profile this off, basically the same as user profile this, but it just creates a VHD from your profile.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering with now that profile being in the
Sure.
storage, as your storage rather than actual file.
Sure. User profile disks were very temperamental. And this is why FSLogix cleaned the floor with them, because this wasn't temperamental. It was a very stable solution. So obviously things can go wrong. But no, I haven't actually tried, yeah. But it's a good question. Okay, I think we need to speed up. What time are we at? Oh my, okay. Okay, so now that we've created the host pools, all we've done is we've created a bunch of VMs, we've joined them to the domain, and they're now available in Azure. So what does the user do? How do the user actually access the virtual desktop? Well, there's a couple of options. First one is there's Windows Remote Desktop Full Client. 32-bit and 64-bit versions, supports Windows 7 and Windows 10. And once you launch the app for the first time, you select subscribe, and you choose you actually sign in, and you'll see the host pool that's been made available to you in that configuration we did earlier. That app is also supported on IoT devices, if you were interested. You can also use HTML5 browser, and there are clients for Android, iOS, and Mac OS. They're remote desktop apps. Okay, some client features before we go much further here then. So Dynamic resolution is available now. The resolution actually gets updated to the size of the screen, right? Subset of monitors is kind of cool. So currently, in the remote desktop app, you can either choose one screen or all your screens. So this is a feature that's coming that you'll be able to choose a selection of the screens and leave some for other stuff. So that's something that's coming. Teams in virtual desktop already supports chat and collaboration, but calling and meeting functionality are on the way. It currently might work, but there are some limitations for that. And here's a summary of the client feature set. So obviously the feature varies depending on the method you use. You can see that MFA is supported in all of them as conditional access, multi-monitors, dynamic resolution on some and other, third-party plugin only on Windows. Okay, so let's have a look at that user experience. What have I got here? Okay, it's just an app on my machine, remote desktop app. And this is my tenant. I've already subscribed. That's my tenant, and these are the virtual desktops. Actually, before I sign in, let's have a look at the settings. Oh, I'm doing it again. Ooh. Well spotted. I'm sorry, say that again?
The web feed into your remote desktop and pull out connections and control panels. That's the valid way to do it, so that you get the actual published apps in your start menu.
Oh, yes, absolutely, yeah. I don't really touch on the apps in this session, but yes is the answer, yeah. Okay, so remote desktop app. Let's have a look at the settings first of all. And you can see that you can use all monitors or just the one monitor, start in full screen, change the resolution. Yeah. So for now, that's all, but the subset of monitors one is coming. Okay, so let's sign in. I'm going to sign in as Joe. And we'll actually see how the FS Logics thing works and works nicely for the profile management. Paul, can you find out if I can go over a bit?
Yeah.
Please, thank you. Okay, so let's see what desktop we're... Yeah, I can go on, yeah, thank you. Okay. Okay, I'm on GH1. So let's just create a little file over here. Okay. Make this big. That's it. Okay, so that was on GH1. Let's sign out then. So literally all I've done is the FS Logics business. I haven't created profile management using any other method. Now, what are the chances this is the same VM? That would upset me. Same one. We're going to try again. Oh, that's terrible. But you actually see when he's signing out, the services, FS Logic services are kicking in. Same thing when you're signing in. It's loading the profile, but it's literally death. So it's loading the profile there. Really is quick. It doesn't matter whether it's 200 meg or 2 gig. It's the same speed. And I'm working pretty quickly. GH2. Very good. And there's my file. Okay. Right, so what are the other possibilities? What's other cool stuff? Now, check this out here. I've not seen this, but this is a corporate desktop in someone's in-car console. I don't know what car that is, but it looks kind of cool. There's the console there. Someone's in a car park. I mean, that's not an iPad. That's his actual console, some car. And he's got his desktop up there. So, kind of cool. Not when driving, of course. But, you know, it's kind of new world stuff. So you can see what's on the roadmap. Much of the investment is actually, it's in latency improvements in several areas throughout the world. And Microsoft is also working on more integration. Actually, you can see the roadmap there, AKMS, WVD roadmap, you can see what's going on. So what Microsoft is working on, a lot more integration with Intune and Config Manager to manage the desktops and the host pool through Microsoft 365. This is actually the start of it. With Config Manager 1910, you can see Windows 10 multi-session support through the client settings, enable user policy for multiple user sessions. That's what that's for. I have noticed, though, somebody talked about it. Was it you that talked about this? That we couldn't manage this. Somebody mentioned it earlier. We couldn't manage this through Azure afterwards. We could create the host pool, but we couldn't. Sorry, did I dream this up in a different room? Somebody said it to me earlier anyway. And we can't see the host pool in Azure afterwards, right? You can see the VMs, but you can't manage the host pool, which is a bit of a pain. Do it yourself. If you look in all resources and search for anything WVD or host pool related, it's not there. So how do we manage them? This is a mock-up of what's coming. It's not there yet. So it's coming. The integration with Azure is coming, but it's not there. So right now, we've only a couple of options. So we can manage the host pool with PowerShell, or we can create our own UI. But it's very easy to create our own. I've done it, and I'm going to show it to you now. Microsoft provided a sample. It's an Azure Resource Manager template, which you use to actually create your own UI. And we're going to have a look at it shortly, but that integration is on the way. Okay, let's have a quick look at that. Right. I'm not going to forget this time to duplicate. Very good. First of all, let's have a look and see how the VMs are getting on. We should have WMUG 0 etc. installed and added to the domain. There we go. So those machines have been created. It takes about 10 minutes, but that process will still be ongoing. It takes 20, 25, as I said. Okay, so if we look in the Azure portal, again, it failed now. Yes, so I'll figure it out. But it created the VMs. We're halfway there. I shouldn't have showed you this bit. Okay, so if we look in the Azure portal, we can look in virtual machines. And you will see my GH0, GH1 machines here, as well as some other things I have. It did create the machines as well, so I don't know what's going on. I think, I tell you exactly what's happened here. I already did this, and I left the machines, so I didn't delete them. So that's why it failed. But, okay, so you can see the VMs, but you can't manage it. So if we look in all resources, right? In all resources, and we do a search for virtual desktop or something, Windows Virtual Desktop. There's nothing. Or if we do host pool, there's nothing at all. So I've already done this. I've downloaded this template and I've applied it, and I'm looking for now an app service. And it's this first one here that I created. And it gives me my URL, which is this one. So that is my URL to my management of my virtual machines. And then you can manage them like you'd expect to. You can add VMs, you can stop them, you can drain them from the pool, put them back, restart them, the usual desktop-y things that you would expect to do, excuse me, when it opens. I think I'm going to crack on with this. We're having demo difficulties. That's bad, isn't it? Okay, we're going to crack on. Okay, just a few more things to talk about. Excuse me. Everyone know what App Assure is? This is hugely important right now. This is Microsoft's commitment to address any application compatibility on Windows 10. It's a fast-track service that they provide, and it's designed to address any application compatibilities when upgrading and updating Windows 10. Have you used it, Chris? Have you used this? Or you haven't had to use it? Didn't? Yeah. But I know of evidence of people that use this, and it's very successful. Right? Microsoft have made these very bold commitments for Windows Virtual Desktop. They've committed that any virtualized apps that run on existing server or existing Windows 10, existing server will run on Windows 10 Enterprise Multi-Session as part of Windows Virtual Desktop. And any apps running in Windows 7 or 10 VDI environment will run on Windows 10, 7 or 10 as part of Windows Virtual Desktop, and the same with this one, apps. So they've made these commitments. If you find apps that don't, they will help to fix them at no cost. Right? That's a massive service that you should avail of. Okay? Okay, so there was some talk about Citrix. I'm going to fly through that. Citrix, we're going to talk about Citrix. We won't talk about VMware. We will talk about MSIX. So MSIX, it's a Windows app package format. Gives you a modern packaging experience for Windows apps. And you can create your own, but you can also repackage apps with the MSIX packaging tool. So MSIX App Attach is a new technology where the MSIX sits in a central location and actually attaches itself to the operating system. And then the apps look like they actually look and behave like they're locally installed, but they're not. They're sitting on a VHD attached to the operating system. So you could imagine when you combine MSIX attach and FSLogic's containers, that means that the operating system can have nothing on it. It doesn't need to have apps installed. It doesn't need to have profiles. It just is a very clean operating system. So you imagine how snappy and how cool that's going to be, right? Finally, a little bit about remote app, just to mention it really. But remote app is obviously supported as well. And you have the same benefits as you would in any other environment. You know, the remote apps are launched from a user start menu. The updates can be published to the app without any impact on the end user. And yeah, so slower, somebody mentioned slower internet links. Remote apps will help you on that. And obviously users that have limited compute can use the compute at the back end. So that's it. Anyone who's been to one of my sessions would know that we always have to finish with a little dance, and this is today's dance. This is the Windows Virtual Desktop dance for today. And thanks again, and thanks very much to the sponsors, Power On Platforms. Thank you.